The clock on the Cracker Barrel wall ticked past 6:30. I'd been sitting alone at this four-person table for over an hour now, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee that had been refilled twice. The Cervera young woman with kind eyes named Bethany kept glancing my way with a look that made my heart sink further into my chest. It was pity, plain and simple. And on my 65th birthday, pity was the last thing I wanted. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am?" Bethany asked, hovering near my table with her order pad clutched against her chest. "No, thank you, dear. I'm sure they'll be here any minute." The words felt hollow even as I said them. I checked my phone again. No messages, no missed calls. The screen showed a photo of my son David and his family from last Christmas. They were all smiling, even little Emma and Jackson, my grandchildren who normally couldn't sit still long enough for a decent picture. I had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. When David called to suggest we celebrate my birthday at Cracker Barrel, my favorite restaurant with its country store and rocking chairs out front, I had been touched. My son rarely made plans with me these days. Between his demanding job as a financial advisor and his family obligations, I was lucky to see him once a month, usually for hurried Sunday afternoon visits where he checked his watch every 15 minutes. "Mrs. Turner?" Bethany was back, refilling my water glass that didn't need refilling. "I hate to ask, but we're getting busy with the dinner rush. Will your party be joining soon?" I looked around at the restaurant filling with families' grandparents with their children and grandchildren, all talking and laughing. The contrast to my solitary table was painful. "I'm not sure," I admitted, my voice smaller than I intended. "Let me try calling again." My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed David's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Again. "David, it's Mom. I'm at Cracker Barrel. We had dinner plans for 6 o'clock. I paused, not wanting to sound accusatory. "I just wanted to make sure everything's okay. Please call me back." As I set down my phone, a text message finally appeared on the screen. "Sorry, Mom. Something came up at work. Can't make it. Rain check?" The brevity stung worse than the cancellation. Not even a happy birthday. No explanation. Just something came up. I sat there, staring at those few words, feeling a hollowness expand in my chest. This wasn't the first time David had canceled plans with me, but it was the first time he'd forgotten my birthday entirely. Or perhaps not forgotten he had made these plans, after all but decided that whatever came up was more important. I thought about the gift I'd brought for Emma, a handmade sweater I'd spent weeks knitting in her favorite color, purple, and the model car kit for Jackson that reminded me of the ones David used to love building when he was a boy. They were still in the trunk of my car, wrapped in birthday paper, even though it wasn't their birthday. I just liked seeing their faces light up when they opened presents. "Ma'am?" Bethany was back, her expression even more sympathetic now. "Would you like to order something to eat?" I looked up at her, suddenly aware of the warmth trickling down my cheek. I brushed away the tear and straightened my shoulders. Margaret Turner did not cry in public. Not at 65 years old. Not after everything life had already thrown at me. "No, thank you. I think I'll be leaving." "I'm so sorry," she said, and I could tell she meant it. "Can I box up something for you to take home? The special today is meatloaf." The kindness of this stranger nearly broke my composure again. "That would be lovely," I managed to say. While waiting for my takeout, I found myself staring at the families around me. At the table directly across, a woman about my age was cutting up food for a toddler who kept reaching for her earrings. The woman's daughter, I assumed, was telling a story, hands animated, while her husband nodded along, occasionally adding a comment that made them all laugh. That should have been me, with David and Sarah and the kids, celebrating 65 years of life, a life where, for the past 35 years, everything had revolved around my son. After Henry died when David was just 10 years old, I devoted myself to giving our son everything he needed. I worked 2 jobs teaching elementary school during the day and tutoring in the evenings to maintain our home in the good school district. I never remarried, though there had been opportunities. My focus had been singular: raise David to be a good man, give him every advantage his father would have wanted for him. And I'd succeeded by most measures. David had graduated from college with honors. He had a beautiful family and a successful career. He owned a house 3 times the size of mine in the best neighborhood in town. But somewhere along the way, it seemed I had become an obligation to him rather than a priority. Bethany returned with a bag containing my meatloaf dinner and insisted on throwing in a slice of apple pie. "It's on the house," she said with a conspiratorial wink. "Everyone deserves cake on their birthday." I thanked her and left a tip that made her eyes widen, but it felt good to show appreciation for the one person who'd shown me kindness on this milestone birthday. As I drove home to my empty house, I couldn't stop the memories from flooding back. David's first steps, running straight into my arms. Teaching him to ride a bike on our quiet street, his small face determined not to show fear. The countless nights I'd sat at the kitchen table helping with homework, even when I was exhausted from my own workday. The sacrifice of putting him through college, emptying my savings, and taking a second mortgage on the house. Telling him not to worry about student loans because I wanted him to start his adult life debt-free. How I'd moved in with my sister for 6 months to rent out my house when money got particularly tight during his junior year. And what had all those sacrifices earned me? A forgotten birthday and a rain-check text message. I pulled into my driveway, noticing how the porch light I'd left on cast long shadows across the lawn that needed mowing. Another task for tomorrow. At 65, the physical chores were getting harder, but I was too proud to ask for help and apparently not important enough for it to be offered. Inside, I set the takeout container on the kitchen counter and sank into my favorite armchair without turning on the lights. The darkness felt appropriate for my mood. Only the blinking light of the answering machine on the side table broke the stillness. I pressed play, hoping against hope it might be David with a better explanation. "Margaret, it's Ellen. Just calling to wish you a happy birthday. Give me a call tomorrow and tell me how your dinner went. Love you." My sister, who never forgot a birthday, I made a mental note to call her tomorrow and decided already that I would lie about the dinner. Why burden her with the truth? The second message began to play. "Mrs. Turner, this is Michael Abernathy from Abernathy & Sons Law Firm. I'm just confirming our appointment for tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock to discuss the updates to your will that we spoke about last week. Please call if you need to reschedule." The will. I'd almost forgotten about the appointment I'd made last week after I'd received the results of some medical tests. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but at my age, the doctor had gently suggested I might want to get my affairs in order. It had seemed like a sign to finally update the will I'd written years ago, especially with the modest inheritance I'd received after my sister's husband passed last year. I'd been planning to divide everything equally between David and my 2 nieces, Ellen's daughters, who called faithfully on holidays and sent handwritten thank you notes for every small gift. But now, sitting alone on my birthday with a cooling takeout container of meatloaf, I found myself wondering, why should David receive anything more from me in death than he was willing to give in life? The thought startled me with its clarity and rightness. For decades, I'd operated under the assumption that mothers give and children take, that my role was to provide and support without expectation of return. Henry had left a small insurance policy that I'd immediately put into a college fund for David, never touching a penny for myself even during the leanest years. But I was tired. Tired of being an afterthought. Tired of making excuses for my son's neglect. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt when plans were canceled or visits cut short. I reached for my phone and did something I'd never done before. I opened Facebook and shared a post, spending my 65th birthday alone after being stood up at Cracker Barrel. Sometimes the people you've given everything to can't give you even an hour of their time. It felt both petty and liberating to type those words. My finger hovered over the post button for several seconds before I finally pressed it. I was not usually one for airing family laundry in public, but tonight, I needed someone to acknowledge that what had happened wasn't right. Within minutes, responses began appearing. Old colleagues, church friends, neighbors. Happy birthday, Margaret. Their loss. You deserve better, honey. Call me tomorrow. We'll have our own celebration. I can't believe anyone would leave you waiting. You're the most thoughtful person I know. And then a comment from Sarah, my daughter-in-law. Margaret, I'm so sorry. David told me he canceled lunch with you because you weren't feeling well. I had no idea you were waiting at Cracker Barrel. We just finished a work dinner with his boss at the Capitol Grill. There must be some misunderstanding. I'll have him call you right away. So that was it. Not only had David stood me up, but he'd lied to his wife about it, claiming I was the one who canceled. And they weren't handling some work emergency, they were at an expensive steakhouse, probably on the company expense account, while I sat alone at Cracker Barrel on my birthday. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was a choice my son had made, a pattern of behavior that had been building for years that I'd refused to see. My phone rang David finally. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. I turned it off completely and went to my home office, where I kept my important papers. It was time to make some notes for tomorrow's appointment with Mr. Abernathy. By the time I went to bed that night, I had drafted a clear outline for my new will. My house and savings would go to my nieces, with specific provisions for some cherished items to go to Emma and Jackson when they turned 21. The small life insurance policy would cover my funeral expenses, with instructions for a simple service. For David, I left a single item, his father's pocket watch, which Henry had always intended for him to have. It seemed appropriately a timepiece for a son who couldn't make time for his mother. As I lay in bed that night, I felt no anger, only a sad resolution. I had spent my life being a good mother. I had given David everything I could. But I would not leave this world rewarding neglect and dishonesty. The next morning, I awoke to 17 missed calls and numerous text messages, all from David. Mom, I'm sorry about dinner. Can we talk? Mom, please answer your phone. Sarah showed me your Facebook post. Mom, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I had an important work thing. Why are you embarrassing me on Facebook? Please take that post down. Not one message mentioned my birthday. I texted back a brief response. I have an appointment this afternoon. I'll call you tomorrow. Then I got dressed in my best blouse and slacks, put on some lipstick, and prepared myself to make the hardest and most important decision of my life that would finally establish that my time, my feelings, and my life had value. As I gathered my papers and purse, preparing to leave for the lawyer's office, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah standing there, looking uncomfortable. Margaret, I'm so sorry about yesterday, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. David feels terrible. He sent me to bring you to lunch so you two can talk. I looked past her to the car in my driveway, where David sat in the driver's seat, scrolling through his phone. He couldn't even come to the door himself. Thank you, Sarah. But as I told David, I have an appointment, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. And quite frankly, I think we both know this isn't about yesterday. This is about years of broken promises and forgotten birthdays. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. I had never spoken so directly before. But he's your son, she said, as if that explained and excused everything. Yes, I agreed, stepping past her and locking my front door. He is my son, and I will always love him, but today, I need to take care of myself. I walked to my car, aware of David watching me from his vehicle, still not making any move to approach me himself. Tell David I'll call him tomorrow, I said to Sarah. Today is about my future. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. There were new lines around my eyes and mouth that hadn't been there a year ago, and my hair was now completely silver. But my eyes were clear and determined. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first. And it felt right. The offices of Abernathy & Sons were housed in a converted Victorian home on Maple Street, the kind of place that spoke of stability and tradition. As I climbed the steps to the wide front porch, I felt a curious mixture of nervousness and determination. I had never made a decision that would so directly affect my relationship with my son. The receptionist, a woman about my age, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Turner, so nice to see you again. Mr. Abernathy is expecting you. Can I get you some tea while you wait?" "That would be lovely, thank you," I replied, settling into one of the leather armchairs in the waiting area. My phone vibrated in my purse again the 5th time since I'd left my house. I didn't need to look to know it was David. Michael Abernathy appeared in the doorway of his office a few minutes later. He was in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair, and reading glasses perched on top of his head. We had known each other casually for years through the local Rotary Club, which was why I'd chosen him when I needed a lawyer. "Margaret, right on time as always," he said, extending his hand. "Come on in." His office was what you'd expect from a small-town attorney, bookshelves lined with legal volumes, a substantial desk, and framed diplomas on the wall. What made it personal were the dozens of family photos displayed proudly on every surface. Michael had 4 children and 7 grandchildren, and from the evidence around the room, spent considerable time with all of them. "How are Susan and the grandkids?" I asked as I took a seat across from his desk. "Wonderful, thank you for asking. Our youngest daughter just had twin boys last month," he said, pointing to a photo of 2 tiny infants. "Susan's been staying with them in Columbus, helping out. I drive up every weekend." I nodded, feeling a twinge of envy for this normal family dynamic, grandparents who were welcomed and included, their help appreciated rather than avoided. "Now," Michael said, his tone shifting to professional, "you mentioned on the phone that you wanted to make some significant changes to your will. Your current will, drafted 7 years ago, leaves everything to your son David, with your sister Ellen as executor. Is that your understanding as well?" "Yes," I confirmed, "but I'd like to make substantial changes today." I explained my new wishes clearly and without emotion, though inside I felt a storm of feeling: sadness, resolution, even a touch of guilt that I pushed firmly away. Michael listened attentively, occasionally making notes. "Just to be clear," he said when I finished, "you want to remove your son as a primary beneficiary and instead leave your house, savings, and most personal possessions to your nieces, with specific items reserved for your grandchildren when they reach adulthood." "That's correct." "And for your son, only his father's pocket watch." "Yes." Michael removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Margaret, I've known you for 15 years. You've always spoken proudly of David and his accomplishments. May I ask what's prompted this change?" I hesitated, not wanting to sound like a bitter old woman complaining about her ungrateful child, but Michael's kind eyes held no judgment, only concern. "Years of being an afterthought," I finally said. "Years of canceled plans and forgotten birthdays. Yesterday was simply the last straw." I told him about waiting alone at Cracker Barrel, about the text message, and about discovering through Sarah's Facebook comment that David had lied about the whole situation. I've spent my entire life putting my son first, I continued. After Henry died, every decision I made was with David's well-being in mind. I worked extra jobs to keep us in a good school district. I never remarried because the few men I dated didn't seem to connect well with David, and I wouldn't risk his stability. I drained my savings and took a second mortgage to put him through college debt-free. I took a deep breath, surprised by the emotion welling up. And now that he has everything, a successful career, a beautiful family, financial security, he can't give me even an hour of his time without checking his watch or his phone. He makes plans and breaks them without a second thought because I don't matter enough for him to keep his word. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Have you discussed these feelings with David? Many times, in many ways, I said. I've tried being understanding about his busy schedule. I've tried asking for specific commitments. I've tried telling him directly that I feel neglected. He always has the same response: he's sorry, he'll do better. He appreciates everything I've done for him. And then nothing changes. And you understand that this decision, while legally sound, may permanently affect your relationship with your son. I do, I said quietly. But I've come to believe that fear of losing his inheritance may be the only thing that makes him reflect on his behavior. And if it doesn't, if he continues to treat me as an inconvenience even after learning about this change, then at least I'll know exactly where I stand. Michael studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll draw up the new will according to your wishes. It should be ready for your signature by early next week. In the meantime, I'll prepare a letter outlining the changes that you can give to David if you decide to tell him directly. Thank you, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The decision was made. As I stood to leave, Michael asked one more question. Margaret, have you considered that David might contest the will after your death? As your only child, he could claim you weren't of sound mind when you made these changes. I smiled slightly. That's why I'm here today, clear-headed and determined, and it's why I want everything properly documented, including my reasons. If David chooses to fight this after I'm gone, he'll only prove I made the right decision. I wasn't surprised to find David's car in my driveway when I returned home. He was sitting on my front porch steps, his expression a mixture of annoyance and concern that seemed more performative than genuine. Mom, he said, standing as I approached. Where have you been? I've been calling you all day. I told you I had an appointment, I replied, moving past him to unlock my door. I didn't invite him in, but he followed anyway. About yesterday, he began, his tone already defensive. I'm sorry about dinner. Things got complicated at work, and… You were at the Capitol Grill with your boss, I interrupted, setting my purse down on the entry table, not handling an emergency. He had the grace to look embarrassed. How did you know that? Sarah commented on my Facebook post, the one you want me to take down because it embarrasses you. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it momentarily softened my resolve. Look, Mom, I messed up. I should have called you sooner. But you didn't have to air our private business online for everyone to see. Would you have preferred I sit alone at that table pretending everything was fine? Should I have told the waitress my son would be there any minute, even as hours passed? Should I have kept making excuses for you to myself and everyone else, like I've done for years? My voice remained calm, but David took a step back as if I'd shouted. In all our previous conversations, I had never been this direct. Mom, you're overreacting. It was one dinner. No, David, it wasn't just one dinner. It was my 65th birthday dinner that you suggested and then abandoned. It was the 4th time this year you've canceled plans with me. It was you lying to your wife about who canceled rather than admitting you stood me up. And it's the fact that even now, standing in my living room, you still haven't wished me a happy birthday. He blinked, genuine surprise crossing his face. I thought I texted you happy birthday yesterday. You didn't. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. I could have sworn. His voice trailed off as he apparently confirmed I was right. I'm sorry, Mom. Happy birthday. We can do dinner tonight to make up for it. The offer came so easily, as if he were offering me a tremendous gift rather than the basic courtesy of keeping his word. And I knew with sudden clarity that if I accepted, we would simply repeat this pattern again and again until the end of my life. No, I said simply. No, he repeated, as if he couldn't possibly have heard correctly. I don't want a makeup dinner. I don't want another promise you'll break when something more important comes along. I moved to my desk and retrieved a folder I'd prepared before leaving for the lawyer's office. What I want is for you to understand that your actions have consequences. I handed him the folder. Inside was a copy of my current will, leaving everything to him, along with a letter explaining my intention to change it, removing him as a beneficiary. What is this? He asked, though his expression told me he'd already grasped the contents. It's what you're about to lose, I said quietly. Not because of one missed dinner, but because of years of showing me exactly how little I matter to you. David's face flushed with anger. You're cutting me out of your will because I missed your birthday dinner. Do you know how childish that sounds? Is that really all you're taking from this? I asked. That I'm being childish? What am I supposed to think? This is manipulation, Mom. You're threatening to disinherit me to make me feel guilty. I shook my head. No, David. I'm finally acknowledging reality. You don't value our relationship. You don't respect my time. You don't appreciate the sacrifices I made to give you the life you now enjoy. Why should you benefit from my death when you can't be bothered to participate in my life? He stared at me, seeming to truly see me for the first time in years. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. The new will leaves most everything to your cousins, who call me regularly and include me in their lives. Emma and Jackson will receive specific items when they're adults. You'll get your father's pocket watch, which was always meant for you. My cousins? His voice rose incredulously. They only care about what they can get from you. The irony of his statement hung in the air between us. When was the last time Jessica or Amanda canceled plans with me? I asked, naming my nieces. When was the last time they forgot my birthday or lied about why they couldn't see me? David had no answer for that. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I continued more gently. I'm doing it because I finally realized that I deserve better than what you've been willing to give me. I deserve to be a priority, not an obligation. So what do you want from me? He demanded, waving the folder. More visits? More phone calls? A standing weekly dinner date? Just tell me what will fix this. His question revealed everything about his mindset. He didn't see the problem with our relationship. He just wanted to know what minimum effort would secure his inheritance. I don't want anything from you that doesn't come from genuine desire to be part of my life, I said. If you only spend time with me to ensure your inheritance, that's not a relationship I'm interested in. This isn't fair, he muttered, sounding more like the teenager he once was than the successful 40-year-old man standing before me. No, I agreed. It isn't fair. It wasn't fair when I had to work 60 hours a week after your father died to keep a roof over our heads. It wasn't fair when I gave up dating because the man I was seeing made you uncomfortable. It wasn't fair when I emptied my retirement account to pay for your final year of college because my second mortgage wasn't enough. I took a deep breath. But I did all those things willingly, David, because I love you. I would do them again in a heartbeat. What I won't do is continue to accept being an afterthought in your life while you expect to be the center of mine. David stood silently, the folder clutched in his hand. I could see him struggling to process what was happening, to find the words that would put everything back the way it was. But there was no going back not to the doormat mother who accepted whatever crumbs of attention he was willing to offer. The new will won't be official until next week. I said finally. You have until then to decide what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Not what kind will secure your inheritance, what kind will make us both feel valued and respected. And if I don't meet your standards? He asked, a defensive edge still in his voice. Then at least we'll both be clear about where we stand. After David left, I sat in my quiet living room and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. There was sadness, yes, but also a surprising sense of peace. For decades, I had centered my life around my son's needs and wants. Today, I had finally acknowledged my own. My phone rang, Ellen, my sister, calling for our daily check-in. So how was the birthday dinner? She asked, after we exchanged greetings. I had planned to lie, to protect David and myself from her inevitable concern. But my newfound commitment to honesty extended to all my relationships. David never showed up, I said, and proceeded to tell her everything, including my visit to the lawyer and confrontation with David. There was a long pause when I finished. Margaret, Ellen finally said, I have to scare you sure about this. He's still your son. I'm sure, I replied without hesitation, and that's precisely why I'm doing it. Because he's my son, and at 40 years old, it's time he learned that relationships require reciprocity. That his mother is a person with feelings and needs, not just a safety net to be taken for granted. And if he doesn't change, if he decides his inheritance isn't worth the effort? It was the question I had been asking myself all day. Then I'll grieve what might have been, I said softly. But I'll know I finally stood up for myself, and there's dignity in that. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My birthday had come and gone, hardly the celebration I had hoped for. But it had become something perhaps more valuable, a dividing line between a lifetime of putting others first and however many years I had left to also prioritize myself. For 3 days I heard nothing from David. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. I tried not to let it hurt, reminding myself that this silence was simply confirmation that I'd made the right decision. On the 4th day, while I was gardening in my front yard, a car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't David's sleek SUV, but Sarah's more modest sedan. She emerged with Emma and Jackson in tow, all 3 carrying gift bags. "Grandma!" Emma called, running toward me with her arms outstretched. At 8 years old, she was all gangly limbs and boundless energy. "We brought you birthday presents." Jackson, 6 and more reserved, followed his sister but with equal enthusiasm. "Daddy said we're really late, but you wouldn't mind." I embraced them both, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and the faint trace of chocolate that seemed to perpetually surround them. I never mind seeing my favorite grandchildren. Sarah approached more slowly, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "Margaret, I hope it's okay that we stopped by without calling first." "Of course," I assured her, though I wondered where David was and why he had sent his wife and children rather than coming himself. Inside, the children insisted I open their presents immediately. Emma had made me a beaded bracelet in my favorite colors, and Jackson had drawn a picture of what he informed me was, "You and me building a super big sandcastle at the beach." "It's for when we go to the beach this summer," he explained seriously. "Dad said we're going to rent a house, and you're coming too." I glanced at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "David's working on the reservations now," she confirmed. "We were thinking 2 weeks in July, if that works for you." I felt a flicker of hope, but tamped it down. A vacation plan was not the same as a fundamental change in how my son viewed our relationship. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. "We'll have to see how the plans develop." Sarah's gift was a beautiful photo album she had apparently spent considerable time creating. It contained not just recent photos of the family, but older ones She must have borrowed from my own collections, David as a baby in my arms, his first day of school, Henry teaching him to fish. I thought you might like having these memories all in one place, she said as I turned the pages. The kids helped me pick which ones to include. It's wonderful, I said sincerely, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you. After the children went to play in the backyard, Sarah and I sat at my kitchen table with cups of coffee. David told me what happened, she said directly. About the will. I nodded, waiting. He was angry at first, she continued. Then defensive. For the past 3 days he's been mostly quiet, which is unusual for him, as you know. I did know. David had always processed emotions by talking sometimes too much. Last night, he started going through old photo albums and boxes from the attic, Sarah said. He found his college acceptance letters, and the cards you sent him every week during his freshman year. He found the scrapbook you made of all his achievements and the ledger where you tracked the college fund. She paused, her eyes meeting mine directly. He didn't know you took a second mortgage, or that you lived with Ellen for 6 months to rent out the house. He had no idea you used your retirement savings for his senior year. I never wanted him to feel burdened by those choices, I explained. They were mine to make. But Margaret, he should have known. He's been operating under the assumption that while you were supportive and loving, his accomplishments were primarily the result of his own hard work and talent. Finding evidence of just how much you sacrificed. She shook her head. I think it's made him reevaluate a lot of things. Where is he now? I asked. At home, making some calls. He's taken a 2-week leave of absence from work to, as he put it, figure out his priorities. He's the one who suggested the beach vacation, said it was time the kids had memories with their grandmother like he had with his grandfather. I felt that flicker of hope again, stronger this time. He's not here today because he wanted to give you space. Sarah continued. And because he's not ready to apologize, he said a simple "I'm sorry" isn't enough, and he needs to figure out how to make real amends. I never wanted grand gestures, I said softly, just to be treated like I matter. I know. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I should have noticed what was happening, how he was treating you. I got caught up in our busy lives and didn't see what was right in front of me. After Sarah and the children left, promising to return soon for Sunday dinner, I sat in my quiet house, feeling cautiously optimistic. One conversation and a vacation plan didn't erase years of neglect, but they were a startling acknowledgement that something needed to change. The next morning, I had just finished breakfast when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find David standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Mom, he said, I was wondering if you'd like to go for a drive with me. There's something I want to show you. All right, I agreed, curious despite my reservations. He drove us across town to a neighborhood of older homes similar to mine. Many were being renovated as young families discovered the charm and affordability of these established areas. He pulled up in front of a small blue house with a for sale sign in the yard. What do you think? He asked, as we sat in the car looking at it. It's a nice starter home for someone, I replied, confused about why he'd brought me here. Sarah and I are thinking of buying it, he said, watching my reaction carefully. Not to live in as an investment property. I nodded, still not understanding the significance. The thing is, he continued, we'd need someone to manage it for us. Someone trustworthy who could screen tenants, handle basic maintenance calls, that sort of thing. It would be a paid position, part-time, but with real responsibilities. Suddenly I understood. And you're offering this job to me? Only if you want it, he said quickly. I know you've been saying you need something to do since you retired from teaching. And I thought. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I thought it might be good for both of us. you'd have some extra income and a new challenge. And we'd have a reason to talk regularly about something other than family stuff. I studied my son's face, seeing a new humility there that had been absent before. "I'm trying, Mom," he said quietly. "I know one gesture doesn't fix everything, but I want you to know I've heard you. Really heard you, maybe for the first time." "And the will?" I asked directly. "If I accept this position, does that mean you expect me to change it back?" He shook his head firmly. "No, that's your decision. This isn't about the will or the inheritance. This is about me finally seeing you as a whole person, capable, intelligent, deserving of respect, not just as my mother, whose only identity is in relation to me." For the first time in years, I felt seen by my son, not as an obligation or a support system, but as Margaret Turner, a woman of worth and dignity in her own right. "I'd like to see the inside of the house," I said finally. David's smile was genuine and relieved. "I have the key. The realtor said we could look around any time." As we walked up the front path together, I felt a shift in our relationship, small but significant. There would be more conversations needed, more moments of truth and reconciliation. The decades-long pattern of being an afterthought in my son's life wouldn't change overnight. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful that change was possible. Not because I had threatened to disinherit him, but because that ultimatum had forced him to confront the reality of our relationship and his own behavior. As for the will, I would keep my appointment with Michael Abernathy next week. But perhaps, instead of removing David entirely, I would create a more balanced distribution. My nieces would still receive their fair share for their consistent care and attention. But David would receive something too, not as an entitlement, but as recognition of our shared history and the possibility of a better future. Whatever I decided, it would be my choice made from a position of self-respect rather than fear or obligation, and that perhaps was the best birthday gift I could have given myself.